Now, I've brought with me today some things which remind me of my dad when I was growing up. So I'm just going to grab my bag. I wonder what might be inside. Elsie, do you want to come and help me pick something out? Strong enough for that? Oh, picked up two things. I'll put that back for a minute. Right, can you hold that up? Come stand here. Stand here. Be careful though. Hold it up so everyone can see. Look at that. What's that? It's a hammer. Well done. Thank you. Okay, I'll call you out again in a minute, and you as well, is it? Okay. It's a hammer. My dad was a builder, and he taught me to use tools. One of my earliest memories as a child is asking my dad for a saw. And he gave me a saw. He gave me a saw. It was as blunt as anything. It wouldn't cut anything, but I tried and I tried to cut a piece of wood with that saw. I so wanted to be like my dad. So that's a hammer. Izzy, do you want to come and choose something? Come on. Here, I'll come to you. You take something out of the bag. Oh, what's that? Thank you. Hold it up. Thank you. Right. This, can you see what this is? This is some goggles and a snorkel, and that reminds me, of course, of holidays. One of the things our dads do, isn't it, is to take us on holiday. Or to take us to swimming pools and things like that, to enjoy ourselves. Do you like swimming, girls? Yeah, you do, yeah. So that reminds me of holidays. Anyone else want to have a go at the bag? Lily, do you want to have a go at the bag? Come on. You can choose anything you like in there. Oh, I know, this is it. Thank you. What is it?
Is it a cupcake?
Yeah, it's a cupcake tin. Thank you very much. Thank you. This is a cupcake tin. Actually, my dad didn't know anything about cupcakes or cooking at all, really. But I didn't want to be sexist this morning, so I thought I ought to put that in, because I know lots of dads are great at cooking and do cooking with their children. That wasn't one from my dad, actually. There's still more in here. Who'd like another go? Who we got? Right. Anybody know this story, The Jolly Postman? It reminded me that my dad used to make up stories, actually, but he also used to read us books. Dads do that, don't they, when you're going to bed at night? Read you stories. That's The Jolly Postman. It's a great story. George Bush Jr. was asked once what was his favourite story when he was a little boy. Do you know what he said? He said, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Do you remember that book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar? The only problem is that George Bush Jr. was born in 1946, and The Very Hungry Caterpillar was published in 1969, when he was 23 years old. He must have been remembering reading it, mustn't he, to his own children, not when he was a little boy. Okay. Right, there's a few more things in here. I'm going to pull them out. Can you see what this is? It's a Southampton scarf. Yes, and it was my dad who first took me to a football match when I was a bit older. It's another thing dads do, isn't it? Now, there's two more things in here. Can you see what this is? Do you know what that is? Plasters. Plasters, because another thing dads do for us is care for us, isn't it? Look after us. when we're not well. Stick plasters on our cuts and that sort of thing. Right, one more thing. One more thing. What can it be? What do you think? It is? It's sort of chocolate, isn't it? Do you remember Caramac? You don't see Caramac a lot these days. But whenever my dad stopped at the shop and went into the shop, we would ask him to buy us a bar of Caramac. They'd often come out with Caramac. We used to love this stuff. And it's Naomi's favourite because she doesn't eat chocolate. She's trying really hard not to eat chocolate, but she'll eat Caramac instead. It's not chocolate. It's like chocolate, but it's not quite the same. Caramac. Well, they're all things that remind me about my dad on this Father's Day. And lots of things there to give thanks for, as I'm sure you have too, for your fathers. Now I'm going to paint a couple of pictures. The first one is one of the hardest things, they say, to paint or draw. So we have to see how we get on. I practiced this, and every time I screwed it up and chucked it in the bin. I couldn't really get it right, but well, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, it's pretty awful as when I did it before, but anyway. It's very good. Can you even guess what it is? Yeah. Did you guess?
She said it.
Did she? Izzy said, oh wow, great. It's praying hands, yes, praying hands. They do say that, don't they? That hands are really difficult to draw. That looks like a pair of praying gloves to me, but still. Praying hands. Why have I drawn Bible? Why have I drawn praying hands? And the answer is because our story today was all about that man who came to Jesus and prayed him, asked him, requested him, begged him to do something for him. He prayed to Jesus as Jesus was right there in front of him and said, well, what did he say? Do you know what he asked Jesus? Please heal my son. That's what he said, didn't he? Please heal my son. His son was back in Capernaum with a fever. This man had come all the way across to Cana to see Jesus and to ask him to heal his son. Quite surprising that this man should come. He was an important man, an official, but he'd obviously heard about Jesus, even though this was the early days of Jesus' ministry, and he had nowhere else to turn. He turned to Jesus. There's lots of things we don't know in this story. We don't know whether this man was a Roman or a Jewish official. We're just told he was an official, an important man. Do you think he was a good father? What do you think? Yeah, good. You think he was a good father. I think he was a good father. You have to read between the lines a bit, but he did come all the way to find Jesus and to ask for his help, I think he was probably a good father. But what did Jesus say to him? I'm not sure that it came out in the animation that we had. What Jesus says to him is, you will never believe unless you see signs and wonders. You will never believe unless you see signs and wonders. But I don't think Jesus was really talking to the man. I think he was talking generally and saying, this is a faithless generation. And what you want to see is signs and wonders. You want to see miracles taking place before you will believe. But we're not going to see miracles. Well, we are sometimes, I guess, going to see miracles in our lifetimes, but not so many. Jesus, however, did a miracle on this day. He said to the man, go home, your son will be well. And it's interesting because the man turned and went home. He didn't question Jesus. He didn't say, how do I know that? He didn't ask any more questions. He just turned and believed and went home. And then we're told on the way, as he was traveling home, his servants met him halfway. They'd come from Capernaum. And he said to them, what time? They said, great news, your son is better, the fever has left him. He said, what time did it leave him? And they said, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He realized that was the exact time that he had spoken to Jesus and that Jesus had told him to go home. The boy would be well. And what was the result of this encounter with Jesus? Somebody tell me what happened? I'm not looking just to the children here, I'm looking to the adults. What was the result of this encounter with Jesus? They believed, yes, not just the man, but his whole household. They believed. They became believers. Now, I'm going to draw one more picture. I've drawn this picture before, but it's worth drawing again. Can you guess what this is, girls? It's a tree. Yeah, it could be a tree, but it's not a tree. Yeah, it could be a lollipop, but it's much bigger than a lollipop. Person, yeah, a sort of stick person. It's not that.
Signpost.
Yeah, who said that? Hey, well done. It's a signpost. You are clever. That's good. This is the signpost. And the interesting thing about the signpost is that it points to something else. So outside of my house, there's a signpost, or just along the road. Looks a bit like that. And it points to Newbury and Newtown in one direction. And it should point to Etchinswell and Kingsclere in the other direction, but it's fallen off. But if it was there, it would be pointing. And a signpost points to something else. And the reason I've drawn that is because in his gospel, John says, not that this was a miracle that Jesus performed, but that it was a sign. In fact, this was the second sign that Jesus did. The first sign, we heard it in the story, was turning water into wine. The second sign was healing this official's son. And so you have to say to yourself, if it was a sign, what is it pointing to? What did Jesus want us to gain from this? What does John, who wrote the gospel, want us to gain from this story? What is it pointing to? And the answer is that it's pointing towards the person of Jesus. It's telling us something about who Jesus was. Here was a boy with fever, and Jesus, in a word, healed him. He could heal him instantly. Who could do something like that? Well, only God could heal instantly in that way. And so this is a sign pointing towards the divinity of Jesus. And that shouldn't surprise us, because as we've been looking at John's gospel right from the very start, we see that John is keen to tell us who Jesus was and to tell us that he was the Son of God, that he was divine, that he had miraculous powers. And then he wants to go on to tell us, of course, that Jesus can heal us and save us from our sins. So what we have here is a man who came and begged Jesus to help. And we have in the sign that Jesus performed a pointer towards who Jesus was, the Son of God.